did every single day when she wakes up inside those walls of the jail. So I have to thank the state of Florida for doing what they've done.
At 1:00 a.m. on November 16, 2016, a quiet home in Loxahatchee, Florida became the scene of a nightmare. Inside the house on Glasgow Drive, 21-year-old James Barry lay in his bedroom, fighting for his life. The night had been calm only moments before, but suddenly it erupted with chaos, screams, panic, and the desperate call for help. James's mother, 56-year-old Nicola Barry, rushed to the phone and dialed 911, her voice shaking with fear as she begged for help. When deputies and paramedics arrived, they found a scene of confusion and heartbreak. James was discovered on his bed, covered in blood from multiple stab wounds. His mother's boyfriend, Guy Hand, was bent over him, pressing his hands against James's chest and trying to perform CPR. The attempts continued when emergency crews took over, moving him to the floor in one last effort to save his life. But despite every attempt, James Barry was declared dead at the scene. The family home, which just hours earlier had been filled with ordinary evening life, was now a crime scene. 3 people stood outside in shock: Nicola, her boyfriend Guy, and James's best friend, Jeff Jarspakowski, who had been spending the night. Their faces showed the trauma of what had just happened. Their clothes and hands carried bloodstains, marks of their frantic attempts to help James before help arrived. Inside, detectives noted the chilling evidence. On the kitchen counter lay a carving knife with a curved 10-inch blade, its white handle stained with blood. A trail led from the kitchen into the bedroom, marking the violent path of the attack. The knife was not a stranger's weapon. It belonged to Guy Hand, a butcher by trade, who had used it earlier that evening to carve a roast for dinner. What had happened that night was only the beginning of a case that would twist and turn in ways no one expected. The girlfriend named as detectives tried to make sense of the bloody scene. The first whispers of suspicion quickly formed. Outside the house, Nicola, Guy, and Jeff spoke in panicked tones, trying to explain what had happened. Almost immediately, one name came up again and again: James's 19-year-old girlfriend, Melanie M. According to Jeff, James had been messaging Melanie earlier in the evening, and the two had argued. James had told his best friend that he wanted to end the relationship. It wasn't the first time the young couple had been on and off, but this time James seemed determined. Earlier that night, around 8:30 p.m., Melanie had shown up at the Barry home uninvited. James turned her away, telling her to leave, but Jeff believed she had returned later. He said James even texted her, "Go away or we're done. We're over." Guy Hand told investigators that every night he locked the doors to the house. That night had been no different, yet somehow someone got inside. There were no signs of forced entry on the front or side doors. Only the back door sat open, raising more questions than answers. Guy speculated that Melanie might have stolen a key or perhaps forced her way in through the garage. Either way, he believed she had slipped in, armed herself with one of his knives from the kitchen drawer, and attacked James. The more they talked, the more their story settled into one direction: Melanie had killed James. They described her as unstable, jealous, and obsessed with their son and friend. Guy even called her psycho in his frustration, convinced that she alone was responsible for what had just happened. Then came the most damning piece of evidence. Near the open back door, investigators spotted a pink cell phone lying on the patio table. It belonged to Melanie. Drops of blood were found close by. To detectives, this discovery was no coincidence. It was a direct link tying James's girlfriend to the murder scene. The case that began as a shocking family tragedy was now pointing toward a young woman whose heartbreak might have turned deadly. Clues in the house, the Barry home, once ordinary and warm, now stood frozen in silence as investigators moved carefully from room to room. Every detail mattered. In the kitchen, the bloodied carving knife caught immediate attention. It was not a weapon brought in by an intruder. It came from inside the home. Guy Hand, who worked as a butcher, admitted it was his knife. Only hours before, he had used it to slice their dinner roast. Its usual place was in the second drawer near the stove, and he explained that Melanie knew the house well enough to know where it was kept. To detectives, this detail suggested the killer hadn't just entered randomly. Whoever it was had familiarity with the home. The trail of blood painted a chilling picture. Drops led from the kitchen into the hallway and toward James's bedroom. It suggested the attack began near the kitchen and continued as James fled down the hall, ending in his room where he collapsed. This sequence told investigators that James had fought to survive, but his injuries were too severe. At the back of the house, attention turned to the open patio door. This was the only possible entry point for the attacker, but how it had been unlocked was still a mystery. Guy swore he locked all the doors before bed. Could Melanie have found a way in, or had someone inside opened it? These questions lingered heavily. Outside, the discovery of Melanie's pink phone on the patio table raised the stakes even further. Not only was her phone at the crime scene, but there were drops of blood nearby. For detectives, this was not just a trace of her presence. It was physical evidence tying her to the moment of violence. By the end of the first sweep, the house told a grim story of betrayal and death. Yet despite the clues, one fact remained unsettling: if Melanie was the killer, how had she managed to get inside a locked home without leaving a single sign of forced entry? This unanswered question kept the investigation wide open. Confession or trap? When investigators caught up with Melanie M., she was hundreds of miles away in Maryland, staying with relatives. Her sudden disappearance after James's death only added to suspicions. Officers located her Toyota Corolla outside her uncle's house, and soon after, detectives from Palm Beach traveled north to speak with her. They didn't place her under arrest. Instead, they claimed they only wanted her statement. Because of this, Melanie was never read her Miranda rights. At her uncle's kitchen table, Detective Oliver pressed record on his phone and began asking questions. His approach was calm, even sympathetic, but his words carried weight. He told Melanie that all evidence pointed to her. He suggested she had gone to James's house with the intention to kill him, but softened it by saying maybe it was a crime of passion, maybe something done in the heat of heartbreak. He pushed her to explain herself. Under pressure, Melanie admitted she had gone to James's house that night. She said she only wanted to talk to him face to face because she refused to believe their relationship was truly over. She confessed that she picked up a knife from the kitchen drawer, but insisted she never meant to kill James. In her words, she only thought she had scared him, that would be okay. She described tossing the knife aside before fleeing. Her words were powerful but confusing, half confession, half denial. She admitted to stabbing James, yet claimed she hadn't realized how badly he was hurt. She said she panicked, drove through the night, and even bought a new phone at Walmart to replace the one left behind. To prosecutors, this was the breakthrough. They needed a direct admission. But to her defense team, it was the opposite. They argued that Melanie had been guided into confessing by the detective's words, trapped into telling a story that matched his theory, not her own. What sounded like guilt to some could also sound like a frightened teenager agreeing to whatever was suggested. The question remained, was her confession the truth, or the result of pressure and manipulation? Verdict and sentence. Melanie M.'s trial began in 2018, and from the start it was filled with tension. Prosecutors painted her as a jealous girlfriend who could not accept the breakup, a young woman who let heartbreak turn into rage. They leaned heavily on her taped statement to Detective Oliver, where she admitted taking the knife and stabbing James. They argued it showed both intent and guilt. Her defense team fought back hard. They claimed the investigation had been flawed from the beginning, too quickly focused on Melanie while ignoring others in the house. They suggested that Guy Hand, James's mother's boyfriend, could have been responsible. He was, after all, the owner of the knife and the one who moved it from the bedroom to the kitchen before police arrived. They said Melanie only confessed because she was a scared teenager, cornered and manipulated into saying what detectives wanted. The jury struggled. After hours of deliberation, they became deadlocked, unable to agree on whether Melanie's crime was second-degree murder or manslaughter. The judge declared a mistrial. A retrial was scheduled for early 2019. This time, the jury reached a decision. They found Melanie guilty of second-degree murder. At her sentencing, the judge considered her age, her lack of criminal history, and her troubled upbringing. But the crime was too severe to overlook. He sentenced her to 50 years in prison. James Barry's family wept in court, knowing no sentence could bring him back. His mother described him as kind, loyal, and full of promise. Melanie, just 19 at the time of the crime, would spend most of her life behind bars. The tragedy had shattered two families forever. The case of James Barry is a haunting reminder of how love, anger, and tragedy can collide. What do you think? Was Melanie's confession genuine, or was it shaped by pressure? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to hit subscribe for more true crime stories like this one.